The morning air was crisp and biting, the sky a dull grey, stretching endlessly above. The road was still wet from last night's rain, and puddles glistened like mirrors reflecting the overcast light. Emma Davis, a young woman in her early 20s, walked with purpose along the cracked sidewalk, her breath visible in the cold air. In her hand was a small paper bag carrying her breakfast, a simple sandwich, and a pair of well-worn cleaning gloves. Her uniform was tidy but faded, and her shoes were on the verge of falling apart, each step accompanied by a faint squeak. Yet her posture remained upright, her stride steady. She wasn't just walking to work, she was holding herself together. Emma was determined not to be late for her job at Crownville Towers, a place where she cleaned floors and scrubbed walls unnoticed by the wealthy guests who passed through. Her small frame seemed to shrink under the weight of her responsibilities, but her spirit was far from broken. She whispered soft words of encouragement to herself, a quiet ritual she'd developed over the years. "Just make it through today," she murmured, her voice barely above the whisper of the wind. Her pace quickened as she neared the main road. That was when she heard it, the deep, powerful roar of a car engine. A sleek white SUV, its paint gleaming despite the dreary morning, hurtled down the road toward her. She instinctively stepped closer to the curb, but it wasn't enough. The SUV's tires splashed through a deep puddle, sending a wave of cold, muddy water cascading over her. The shock of it stole her breath. Her uniform was drenched, her small bag soaked and sagging. Mud stained her face, her hair plastered to her cheeks. The SUV didn't slow down. Instead, the tinted window slid down just enough to reveal the driver, a well-dressed man in his 50s with a smug grin and bright red lipstick. It was Dwayne Johnson, a name that carried weight in the city's fashion world, known as much for his high-profile lifestyle as for his arrogance. "Watch where you stand next time," he called out, laughter echoing as the window rolled back up. The SUV sped away, leaving Emma standing in the road, shivering and humiliated. Her lips trembled, her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Emma squared her shoulders, took a deep breath and picked up her muddy bag. She couldn't afford to be late, not today. From across the street, a black car sat quietly, its windows tinted. Inside, a man named Ethan Cole watched everything unfold. His sharp gaze followed the SUV, then shifted back to Emma. Ethan's jaw tightened. He recognized Dwayne Johnson, the arrogant tycoon who believed he could do whatever he pleased. But what Dwayne didn't know was that Ethan had been watching, and Ethan believed in justice, in actions that mattered. He picked up his phone. "Find out who that girl is," he said softly. "I want to know everything." Emma's heart raced as she hurried toward Crownville Towers, her shoes squelching with every step, her damp clothes clinging to her skin. Her cheeks were flushed, not from the cold, but from humiliation, as the stares of strangers felt like needles pricking her pride. She tried to keep her head down, to move quickly, but the weight of the mud-soaked uniform and her muddied breakfast bag made every step feel heavier. At the building's side entrance, she paused to catch her breath, her hands trembling slightly as she attempted to brush the mud from her sleeves. Inside, the warm, sterile air of the building provided no comfort. Her supervisor, Mr. Clark, spotted her immediately, his brows knitting into a disapproving frown. "Emma, you're late," he barked, his voice echoing down the tiled hallway. He eyed her disheveled appearance with clear disgust. "And what is this mess? You're supposed to look presentable." Emma lowered her gaze, her voice barely audible. "I was splashed by a car," she whispered. Mr. Clark's lips tightened, his tone harsh and unforgiving. "No excuses. Get to work. This place needs to be spotless before the guests arrive." Emma nodded quickly, her throat tightening as she turned away and headed toward the cleaning closet. Her co-workers glanced her way, some with pity, others with veiled judgment, but none offered a word of support. The silence was louder than any scolding. Alone in the supply room, Emma found a spare uniform, one older and even more threadbare. than her own. She changed quickly, tying her hair back with trembling fingers. She couldn't afford to let today's setback cost her this job. Her younger sister, Olivia, was counting on her. Meanwhile, far above the city streets, Ethan Cole sat in his sleek office, a room of glass and steel that overlooked the bustling downtown. He wasn't just any observer. He was one of the city's youngest and most successful CEOs, a man whose quiet demeanor masked a sharp mind and an unshakable sense of justice. His assistant entered, carrying a slim file. "Here's the information. You requested," she said. Ethan flipped it open, his eyes scanning the contents. Emma Davis, 23, 2 cleaning jobs, lives in West Pine, caring for a younger sister since their mother passed away. His gaze softened as he studied the attached photo, a snapshot of Emma smiling gently beside her sister. He tapped the photo thoughtfully, his voice low. "She didn't deserve that," he murmured. His assistant hesitated. "Do you want me to do something?" Ethan's jaw tensed as he met her eyes. "Yes," he said quietly, "but not yet. Let's watch a little more." Across town, Dwayne Johnson, seated comfortably in his luxurious penthouse, was oblivious to the storm brewing. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from stylists, brand partners and admirers. He adjusted his gold necklace with a smirk, sipping a green smoothie as he admired his reflection. To him, Emma was just another insignificant face in the crowd, unworthy of a second thought. What he didn't know was that the world he believed he ruled was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. Ethan sat back in his leather chair, fingers tapping lightly on the armrest as he reviewed the information about Emma. Her story resonated with him more than he cared to admit. There was a quiet strength in her smile in that photograph, a resilience he recognized from his own past. But while Ethan had risen to the top of the business world, Emma was still fighting to keep her place on the ground. He found himself wondering how many people like her were overlooked, dismissed, or belittled because they lacked wealth or status. That SUV incident wasn't just unfortunate. It was a stark reminder of the imbalance he had fought so hard to escape, and it made him think. Meanwhile, Emma continued her shift at Crownville Towers, her back aching from hours of mopping and scrubbing. Each time she bent down to clean, her body protested, but she refused to slow down. Her mind wandered to her sister, Olivia, still sleeping peacefully at home in their small apartment, unaware of the muddy disaster that had marred her morning. Emma drew strength from the thought of her. "One more day," she whispered, her breath gripping the mop handle tighter. "Just get through today." Across the city, Dwayne Johnson was oblivious to the impact his careless act had set in motion. He was in the middle of a high-profile photo shoot, the studio filled with lights and assistants bustling around him. His polished image, his tailored suits, his charming grin, everything was crafted to project success and superiority. As the camera flashed, Dwayne adjusted his posture and smirked confidently. He wasn't just a man, he was a brand that demanded admiration and commanded attention. But while he was busy posing for the cameras, far more significant developments were quietly unfolding behind the scenes. Back at Crownville Towers, Emma's stomach growled softly as she slipped behind the building for her quick lunch break. Perched on an old crate, she unwrapped a simple piece of bread and sipped water from a battered plastic bottle. Her fingers trembled as she checked her phone for any missed messages from Olivia. The screen was blank. She exhaled slowly, trying to push away the knot of worry tightening in her chest. Just then, a man in casual clothes, wearing a cap and sunglasses, strolled past the hotel entrance. It was Ethan. He pretended to check his phone, but his eyes lingered on Emma, quietly observing her from a distance. He saw her grace as she ate, the care with which she unwrapped her modest meal, the quiet dignity in her posture despite her exhaustion. For a moment, Ethan felt a wave of protectiveness he couldn't explain. She reminded him of his late mother, strong, silent, and unyielding, no matter how tough life became. As he walked away, a plan was already forming in his mind. She doesn't know it yet, but her story is about to change, he thought. His steps, purposeful as he melted back into the city's crowd. The afternoon air inside Crownville Towers was filled with the faint scent of polish and detergent as Emma returned to her cleaning duties. Her shoes still squished with each step, the muddy water from earlier now dried into dark patches across her uniform. Despite the coldness of her wet clothes, she straightened her back and moved methodically through her tasks. The luxury of the lobby gleamed under her touch, though no one acknowledged her efforts. Guests passed by, their eyes fixed ahead, their steps echoing over the marble floors, treating her as if she were invisible. Mr. Clark, her supervisor, appeared at the end of the hall, clipboard in hand, his brows furrowed at the sight of Emma's appearance. "Emma," he called sharply, "that uniform is unacceptable. You look like you've been dragged through the street." His tone was harsh, filled with impatience rather than concern. "I was," Emma replied quietly, her voice so soft it was almost lost in the cavernous lobby. But Mr. Clark dismissed her explanation with a wave of his hand. "Excuses. This place needs to be perfect for the evening guests. No slip-ups. Do you understand?" Emma nodded silently, feeling the weight of the morning's humiliation settle deeper into her bones. She tried to ignore the stares from a few co-workers nearby. Their glances were fleeting, pitying, but no one offered help. No one stepped forward to share the burden or even a kind word. She bit her lip, focusing on the task at hand, pushing aside the sting of embarrassment. In the supply room, Emma changed into an old, faded backup uniform. It was too large at the shoulders and a little too short at the wrists, but it was dry and free from the mud stains that marked her earlier attempt at dignity. She tied her hair back tightly, her hands trembling slightly as she secured the elastic. As she slipped on her old cleaning gloves, her thoughts drifted to Olivia waiting at home, her little sister's smile and the warm light of their small apartment. Emma whispered a quiet prayer under her breath as she stepped back onto the marble floor. "Just get through today," she murmured. The repetition of those words was her shield, her armor against the indifference around her. Meanwhile, far from the gleaming floors of Crownville Towers, Ethan Cole sat in his sleek office, surrounded by walls of glass that offered a panoramic view of the city. He stared at Emma's profile photo in the file on his desk, his expression thoughtful. "She didn't deserve that," he said softly, almost to himself. His assistant, standing nearby, tilted her head. "Would you like me to intervene?" she asked cautiously. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the photo. "Not yet," he said quietly, his tone deliberate. "Let's wait. Watch a little more." As dawn broke the next morning, the sky painted in hues of pink and gold, Emma woke. Before her alarm, she quietly tiptoed around the small apartment she shared with Olivia, ensuring her little sister was still sleeping peacefully. She prepared a simple breakfast, packed Olivia's lunch, and tied her shoelaces with a gentle smile. "Be good at school, okay?" she whispered softly. Olivia, still half asleep, nodded and replied, "You too, Emmy." Those words stayed with Emma during the long bus ride back to Crownville Towers. Arriving at work, Emma made her way to the locker room, preparing for another long day. As she opened her locker, a small paper bag caught her attention. Inside, she found a pair of new, durable cleaning gloves, a warm sandwich wrapped in foil, and a folded note. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the paper. The handwritten message read, "For the girl who works with grace, even when the world is unkind." Emma's breath caught in her throat, her eyes stinging with unexpected emotion. She looked around, half expecting someone to reveal themselves, but the room was empty. She carefully unwrapped the sandwich, its warmth seeping into her cold hands. The aroma of fresh bread and melted cheese was intoxicating, a rare comfort she hadn't indulged in for weeks. As she took her first bite, she felt the weight of the previous day begin to lift, just a little. She didn't know who had left the package, but in that moment, she felt seen. It was a quiet acknowledgement of her resilience, a whisper of kindness in a world that had often ignored her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Far across town, Ethan Cole watched through the internal security feed of the hotel, a feed he had legal access to through his company's security partnership. He observed Emma's reaction from his office, a satisfied nod accompanying her quiet gratitude. "Small steps," he murmured under his breath. The plan he had been quietly crafting was beginning to take shape. At the same time, Dwayne Johnson sat under studio lights, flashing his signature grin for cameras during a live talk show appearance. The host praised his latest designer collection, showering him with compliments about his impeccable style and influence. Dwayne preened under the attention, his polished image projecting confidence and control. But the moment the cameras stopped rolling, his demeanor shifted. "My coffee was too cold," he snapped at his assistant. "Fire the new girl." No one dared challenge his outburst. In his world, power was wielded through intimidation and status. Meanwhile, Emma continued her shift with a renewed sense of purpose. The sandwich had filled more than just her stomach. It had sparked a flicker of hope. She held onto the note tightly, folding it with care and slipping it into her pocket. As she returned to her tasks, her posture was a little straighter, her steps more confident. Someone out there believed in her, and for now that was enough. That evening, the air inside Crownville Towers carried a hush, a contrast to the clatter and chatter of the day. Emma was in the middle of mopping the grand lobby, her movements steady and precise despite her aching muscles. The weight of her earlier surprise, the sandwich and note, still lingered in her mind, a buoy that kept her afloat through the long hours. Suddenly her supervisor, clipboard in hand, called out sharply from across the hall. "Emma Davis!" he barked. Startled, she straightened and approached. Her heart raced, unsure what more could go wrong today. He glanced at his clipboard, his tone clipped. "You've been reassigned," he said flatly. "VIP floor maintenance starting tomorrow." Emma blinked in disbelief, her mind scrambling to process the words. "Sir, are you sure? I didn't apply for—" she started to say. He cut her off with a wave of his hand. "It's been approved. Better pay. Less mess. Congratulations." His words were curt, but there was a finality to them that left no room for questions. As she walked away, the murmurs among her co-workers followed her like a shadow. "VIP floor? For her?" someone whispered. "Did she charm someone up top?" another sneered. Emma kept her head down, her cheeks burning, but she said nothing. Rumors had always swirled like smoke in the background of her days. This wasn't new. What mattered was that she was moving forward, even if she didn't fully understand why. That night, in their small apartment, Emma shared the news with Olivia, who squealed with delight and hugged her tightly. "See, good things can happen," Olivia said, her voice full of innocence and hope. Emma's heart ached at the thought of her little sister's unwavering faith, even when the world seemed determined to knock them down. Far from the modest apartment, Ethan Cole was at his desk, reviewing plans for the following day. His phone buzzed softly with an incoming call. He answered, his voice calm but firm. "I want her promoted," he said to the hotel's regional manager. "Find a way," quietly. The manager hesitated. "But she's just a cleaner," he began. But Ethan's voice sharpened. "She's not just anything," he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Meanwhile, Dwayne Johnson lounged in his penthouse, scrolling through his social Media, basking in the glow of his curated image. His reflection shimmered in the floor-to-ceiling windows as he scrolled past adoring comments and likes. But just as he began to relax, an envelope slid under his door. He frowned, picking it up, his brows knitting as he opened it. Inside was a grainy photograph of his SUV splashing mud on Emma, with a sticky note attached. It read simply, "Not everyone forgets." Dwayne's lips curled in a sneer as he crumpled the note, but a sliver of unease wormed its way into his chest. In the quiet of her apartment, Emma prepared for the new day. She laid out her backup uniform carefully, still in disbelief that tomorrow she would step onto the VIP floor. She wasn't sure who had seen her worth when so many had overlooked her, but deep down, a fragile hope flickered to life. Someone believed in her, and maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. The next morning, Emma stood before the tall mirrored doors of Crownville Tower's VIP floor, her reflection crisp, yet shadowed by uncertainty. Her hands smoothed over the slightly oversized backup uniform she still wore, though today it felt different. She inhaled deeply, steeling herself for the unfamiliar world beyond the glass. As the doors slid open, the air changed. A hint of fresh flowers, expensive polish, and quiet elegance filled her senses. The plush carpet underfoot softened her hesitant steps as she entered, determined not to let her nerves show. She worked, with meticulous care, polishing the gleaming surfaces and adjusting arrangements with an artist's precision. Every corner sparkled beneath her touch, even as her thoughts swirled with questions. Who had noticed her efforts? Who believed in her enough to grant her this opportunity? The rumors from her co-workers still echoed in her mind, but she pushed them aside, focusing on the task at hand. From a lounge chair nearby, a man in casual clothes and sunglasses appeared to be reading a newspaper. But as he lowered the paper, revealing a slight smile and sharp eyes, Emma recognized the same man she had seen before, the one who had watched her quietly outside. He rose smoothly, his movements deliberate but unassuming. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and warm. "Do you know where the Sky Lounge is?" Emma straightened, her heart racing but her voice steady. "Yes, sir," she replied, with a gentle nod. "I'll walk you there." They moved side by side through the softly lit corridors, her steps measured, his casual yet observant. As they walked, he glanced at her. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. She hesitated briefly, then answered softly, "Almost 2 years. It's been tough, but it pays the bills." He nodded thoughtfully. "Do you enjoy it?" She paused again, her eyes briefly meeting his before dropping to the floor. "I don't know if anyone dreams of mopping floors, but I'm thankful. I try to do my best," she said quietly. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "You do more than that," he said softly, a rare sincerity in his tone. "You shine." Emma let out a soft laugh, her cheeks coloring faintly. "Thank you," she murmured, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The man gave a slight smile but didn't press further. "I think the Sky Lounge is just ahead," she said, gesturing politely. He nodded, his smile lingering. "Thank you for your help," he said, and she inclined her head slightly before stepping back as he watched her retreat. His smile faded into a contemplative expression. He remained standing there for a moment longer, before finally turning away, his thoughts quietly unfolding. Later that evening, as Emma recounted her day to Olivia, she couldn't help but smile softly. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a cleaner or a background figure, but as a person worth noticing. She didn't yet know his name, but his words stayed with her, echoing in her mind like a quiet promise. "You shine." As days passed, whispers in Crownville Towers grew louder. Emma's quiet rise to the VIP floor had not gone unnoticed. Some staff admired her determination and quiet grace, but others, particularly Tina, a senior cleaner, felt resentment growing. Tina's words were sharp, her tone biting as she muttered to her peers, "She's been here less time than me, and suddenly she's VIP. Must be something shady going on." Emma heard the murmurs, but she kept her head down, focusing on her work. Every gleaming surface, every polished edge was her silent answer to the rumors. Despite her best efforts to stay invisible, her competence and kindness shone brighter, and so did the jealousy. One evening, as Emma prepped her cart for the next day, Tina slipped into the supply room. She cast a quick glance around to ensure no one was watching. With a smirk, she swapped Emma's cleaning solution with a slippery, soapy mixture that would make any surface hazardous. It was a petty move, but Tina felt vindicated. She convinced herself that Emma deserved to be brought down a notch. The next morning, disaster struck. A distinguished guest slipped on the lobby's marble floor. Voices rose, the sound of hurried footsteps echoing through the grand hall. The hotel's manager stormed into the scene, his face flushed with frustration. "Who cleaned this area last?" he demanded, clipboard in hand. Emma was summoned, her hands trembling as she tried to explain. "I swear I used the correct solution," she said, her voice cracking under the pressure, but her protests fell on deaf ears. Her supervisor's disapproving glare and the judgmental glances of her co-workers made it clear they were ready to believe the worst. But not everyone was convinced. In a quiet office nearby, Ethan Cole watched the commotion unfold on the hotel's surveillance feed. His jaw tightened as he observed the scene. Without hesitation, he called the hotel's head of security. "Review the footage from the supply room last night," he said firmly. Moments later, the truth emerged. Tina had tampered with Emma's cart. The evidence was undeniable. The hotel manager was called into Ethan's office, his face pale as he realized the gravity of the situation. Ethan's tone was calm but firm. "Apologize to Emma," he said. "She's innocent." Tina was suspended for 2 weeks, her scheming exposed for all to see. Emma was called into the manager's office, her heart racing. "Emma, we owe you an apology," the manager said, his voice subdued. Relief flooded through her, though she held back tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice steady but soft. As she left the office, she felt a mix of emotions, vindicated, yet exhausted. From the ordeal, across the lobby, Ethan watched her silently, his expression thoughtful. "She doesn't even know I saved her," he mused. "But one day, she will." And for the first time, Emma allowed herself to hope that perhaps her story was beginning to turn. The air in Crownville Towers felt heavier as Emma quietly resumed her work. Though Tina's sabotage had been uncovered and her name cleared, whispers still lingered in corners of the hotel. But Emma was determined to focus on what I could control, the pride she took in her work and the quiet strength that had carried her this far. She was scrubbing a polished table on the VIP floor when she heard a voice behind her. "You again," the voice said, light with amusement. She turned, surprised to see the same casually dressed man with the sharp eyes and kind smile. It was Ethan, though she still didn't know his full identity. "You really like this hotel?" Emma replied with a small, genuine smile. Ethan chuckled, his hands tucked casually in his pockets. "I like seeing things grow," he said, his gaze steady and calm. Emma tilted her head, curiosity flashing in her eyes. "You're not just a guest, are you?" she asked quietly. Ethan smiled, a hint of admiration softening his features. "You're smart," he replied. He extended his hand, his voice steady. "Ethan Cole, owner of Cole Estates. I'm part of the group that oversees this hotel." Emma's breath caught, her heart skipping a beat. You're Ethan Cole," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, a gentle smile still playing on his lips. "I'm just Ethan," he said softly. "And I've been watching." He quickly added, "Not in a creepy way, I promise." A nervous laugh bubbled from Emma, her cheeks flushing with color. "I saw what happened to you that day," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "The car, the mud, and how you just kept walking. You didn't deserve that." Emma's smile faded, her lips parting in surprise. For a moment she was at a loss for words. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan continued gently. "Just know, I see you." Emma's eyes glistened as she nodded silently, her throat tight with emotion. That evening she walked home quietly, her thoughts swirling like the city lights around her. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of someone seeing her not as a cleaner or a background figure, but as a person worth noticing. The realization was both humbling and exhilarating. In his penthouse, Dwayne Johnson scrolled through his social media feed, his jaw tightening as he came across a blurry photograph of his SUV splashing Emma. The caption beneath it read, "Some people think money erases manners." It had been reposted hundreds of times. Dwayne's lip curled as he slammed his phone onto the table. "Who's spreading this nonsense?" he growled at his assistant. "Maybe you should apologize," the assistant murmured hesitantly. Dwayne scoffed, bitterness dripping from his tone. "Apologize? To a street cleaner? I don't even remember her face," he snapped. But deep down, a flicker of unease stirred within him, though he quickly buried it beneath layers of arrogance. Meanwhile, Emma sat quietly in her modest apartment, her hands trembling as she reread the scholarship offer Ethan had handed her. She couldn't quite believe it. She wasn't just being seen, she was being chosen. The realization left her overwhelmed and breathless, her mind spinning with gratitude and disbelief. The next day dawned quietly, but the city buzzed with whispers of scandal. Emma, now more confident, though still humble, continued her work on the VIP floor. She had begun to feel a sense of pride, of belonging, as if her efforts were finally being acknowledged. But just as her hope was taking root, a sleek car pulled up beside her on her walk to work. The window rolled down smoothly, revealing Dwayne Johnson, his sunglasses shielding his expression. "You're Emma, right?" he asked, his voice laced with thinly veiled contempt. Emma froze, stepping back cautiously. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady but quiet. Dwayne gave a tight, forced smile. "You've caused quite the stir," he said, his tone dismissive. "Now people think I'm some villain." Emma's brows furrowed. "I didn't do anything," she said, confusion and hurt coloring her words. Dwayne leaned closer, his tone sharp. "You didn't have to. Playing the victim works wonders, doesn't it?" His words hung in the air, thick with accusation. Emma's heart pounded, but she met his gaze evenly. "I never wanted pity," she said firmly. "I just wanted to work in peace." Dwayne let out a bitter laugh, the sound grating. "You think Ethan sees you? He's like all rich men. He'll get bored." "Don't let the attention fool you, sweetie," he said, the condescension dripping from his voice. Then he rolled up the window and drove off, leaving Emma standing in the street, shaken but not broken. Later that day, Ethan waited for her in the hotel's cafe during her break. When Emma hesitated at the entrance, unsure if she should approach, he smiled warmly and waved her over. On the table before him was a folder, its contents neatly arranged. "What's this?" she asked, her voice cautious but curious. Ethan slid it toward her. "A scholarship," he said softly. "Full hospitality training paid for. It starts next month. You'd still work here part-time if you want." Emma's hands trembled as she opened the folder, her breath catching in her throat. "Why me?" she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Ethan's gaze was steady, his voice gentle but firm. "Because you never asked for anything," he said. "But you deserve everything." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as the weight of his words settled over her. In that moment, for the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as a cleaner or as someone's charity case, but as a person worthy of opportunity and respect. From across the room, unseen by either of them, Dwayne watched the exchange through the glass windows of the cafe, his fists clenched at his sides, his lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. The mud he had splashed on Emma wasn't just water, it had started something unstoppable. And now, the girl he had dismissed so easily was rising higher than he ever imagined. Emma, sitting with the scholarship letter trembling in her hands, felt her world begin to shift. This wasn't just a moment of kindness. It was the beginning of a new chapter, and for the first time she was ready to embrace it. As the final words settle and the images fade, remember this. In a world where arrogance often overshadows kindness, Emma's story reminds us that true strength lies in perseverance and integrity. If you were moved by her journey, from mud-splattered despair to a quiet, dignified victory, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with those who need hope, and drop a comment sharing your own story of resilience. And for more stories that defy the odds and celebrate the human spirit, make sure to subscribe, because when the world tries to silence you, let your courage speak louder.